Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine looking right at the very edges of our universe, seeing galaxies that challenge, well, everything we thought we knew about creation. Or maybe discovering an entirely new branch on the tree of life right here on Earth. That's just a glimpse, really, of the incredible scientific breakthroughs we're diving into today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. We take complex global news and distill it into, hopefully, surprising facts and essential insights just for you.
Today, we're navigating a really expansive landscape. We'll go from the farthest reaches of space, where new cosmic formations are reshaping our understanding of gravity and planetary birth. Then we'll swing back to the intricate dance of geopolitics, looking at major summits and, unfortunately, ongoing conflicts. We'll also explore significant societal challenges, things like critical public health debates and the evolving impacts of climate change. And finally, we'll touch on some shifts in technology and consumer trends, too.
It's a whirlwind of a world out there, isn't it? And we're here to try and guide you through what's truly important, maybe with just enough humor to keep you hooked along the way. So buckle up because this deep dive starts now. All right, let's kick things off by turning our gaze upward, way, way upward to the cosmos. Our first stop is with the incredible insights coming from NASA's, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST. It's truly revolutionizing what we thought we knew about the universe.
It absolutely is. The JWST just keep delivering these groundbreaking observations. Astronomers over at the University of Missouri, they've identified about 300, unusually bright cosmic objects. These could be some of the earliest galaxies ever formed after the Big Bang. And this isn't just an observation, it's actually compelling scientists to completely reevaluate existing theories on how galaxies, well, how they actually form.
300. New galaxies defying explanation. That's just wild. What is it about the JWST, its capabilities, that lets us peer so far back, into the universe's infancy to make discoveries like this?
Well, a big part of it is the JWST's massive primary mirror. It's 6.5 meters across. That's significantly larger than Hubble's 2.4 meters. Combine that with the fact that it operates in the infrared spectrum. That's key. That infrared vision lets us basically cut through cosmic dust and detect light from objects formed less than a few 100 million years after the Big Bang.
Okay, so it sees things Hubble just couldn't.
Exactly. And previous findings, even before these 300, already confirmed galaxies, like one called JSGS Z140, dating back just 300 million years post-Big Bang. That already suggested a much faster cosmic structure development than we anticipated. Now, if these 300 new candidates are confirmed, well, it means the early universe was far more active, maybe more efficient, at forming massive structures than our current cosmological models predict.
Right. So this rapid formation, what does it really mean for our understanding of the universe's infancy? Could it, I don't know, hint at a different role for dark matter than we currently imagine?
That's definitely one of the big questions. This speed could fundamentally force us to reconsider dark matter's role in the universe's nascent stages, potentially hinting at a different or maybe a more complex interaction than we currently assume. It truly challenges our cosmic timeline.
And speaking of rewriting the rulebook, the JWST made another, well, mind-boggling discovery. This time maybe a bit closer to home in terms of planetary formation. It found a planet nursery, essentially a planet-forming disk that's incredibly rich in carbon dioxide, CO2, but remarkably low in water content.
Yes, this finding is particularly intriguing, and this disk is located in an intense radiation environment, which makes it even stranger. Conventionally, we've always, basically assumed water was the essential ingredient for planet formation, especially for any world that might eventually host life.
Right, water's the key.
Or so we thought. This discovery directly challenges that long-held theory and the unique isotopic signatures of the CO2 they found there. They could provide invaluable insights into the origins of materials that make up our own solar system, things like meteorites and comets. But looking forward, for future exoplanet research, if water isn't always abundant, well, it suggests that life could potentially arise under a much wider range of chemical conditions than we currently assume.
So maybe we're too focused on a water-centric view of habitability.
It's possible. We might need to broaden our definition of what makes a planet potentially habitable.
So maybe alien life is just really into sparkling water. I mean, who knows, right? It just opens up so many possibilities. Okay, from the very large, like galaxies and planet nurseries, let's zoom into the very, very fundamental. We're shifting gears now to gravity itself, because some recent research is actually challenging the long-standing theories of Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein.
You're absolutely right, and it's It's more than just a tweak. It fundamentally challenges what we thought we knew. There's recent research from Sejong University in South Korea, led by a physicist named Kyuhun Chae, and it's directly questioning the fundamental concepts of gravity as laid out by Newton's law of universal gravitation and, of course, Einstein's general relativity.
How are they doing that? What kind of data are they looking at?
They analyze the gravitational dynamics of what are called wide binary star systems, using data from the GAIA spacecraft. These systems are, well, they're kind of ideal testbeds because they offer a relatively simple two-body interaction, but in a vast cosmic setting. The real significance here is that their findings show significant deviations from traditional predictions, specifically at low accelerations.
Low accelerations. Why is that important?
Because that's precisely where alternative theories, like something called modified Newtonian dynamics, or MOND, suggest that gravity should behave differently.
MOND. Okay, I've heard of that, but it's always seemed a bit fringe.
It has been, largely. MOND suggests gravity is actually stronger than predicted by Newton's law at these very low accelerations. And that difference could account for observations we typically attribute to dark matter, like why galaxies rotate faster than they should based on visible matter alone. This new study lends significant new support to MOND.
So this is the kind of science that makes you re-examine everything you thought was set in stone, literally in space. If these findings hold up, I mean, it could fundamentally redefine our models of the universe, right? And push us to rethink dark matter entirely. We've relied on dark matter to explain so many gravitational anomalies.
Exactly. If gravity itself behaves differently at certain scales, under certain conditions, then perhaps dark matter isn't the explanation, or at least not the whole explanation. This could imply the universe is governed by slightly different gravitational rules than we've assumed, especially on galactic scales. It's a really critical moment for astrophysics. It might force a reconciliation or maybe even a complete reevaluation of our most cherished gravitational theories.
Wow. Okay. And speaking of things we thought we had neatly categorized, let's talk about life itself. Because scientists have just discovered what's being called the first new branch on the tree of life.
This is a truly remarkable biological discovery. Researchers at Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, Canada, have identified a new group of microorganisms. They're called hemimastigotes. And the amazing thing is, these organisms don't fit into any of our existing biological kingdoms. Not plants, animals, fungi, or any other established category.
Wait, none of them. So where do they fit?
That's the point, they don't. They seem to represent a major new branch, possibly an entire new kingdom, or even a super kingdom, all on its own, within the eukaryote domain, which is the domain that includes all organisms with complex cells, like us.
Just when you thought you knew all the major categories of life, Earth throws a curveball. It makes you wonder what else is hiding in plain sight, doesn't it? Where did they find these things?
That's maybe the most surprising part. They were found in regular soil samples from Nova Scotia, just soil. This discovery really questions the completeness of our current tree of life model.
So it's not complete.
It seems not. It absolutely highlights the vast, unexplored biodiversity, especially in the microbial world. These hemimastigotes have unique cellular structures and genetic characteristics that really set them apart. It underscores that our current classification systems, while robust, are still incomplete, especially at the microscopic level. This kind of finding reminds that even in seemingly ordinary environments, there's just immense biological complexity yet to be discovered. And understanding them could offer huge insights into evolutionary biology, maybe even the origins of diverse life forms on our planet.
Amazing. From these mind-bending biological discoveries, let's zoom out a bit to our planet's ancient past, which, surprisingly, is also getting a major rewrite. It turns out even Earth's ancient history is surprising us.
Yes. On Earth itself, our understanding of geology is, well, it's getting a significant update. Researchers at Stanford University have demonstrated that meandering rivers, the curvy ones, existed long before plants appeared on Earth.
Really? I always thought you needed plants, like roots, to hold the banks together to make rivers meander like that.
That was the long-standing geological assumption, yes, that vegetation was absolutely necessary for such complex river formations to develop. But these researchers used innovative modeling techniques, looking at ancient carbon-rich floodplains. And they provided evidence that sediment and water flow played the pivotal role in shaping terrestrial landscapes for billions of years, actually independent of flora.
So all those textbook diagrams with plants holding the banks of a meandering river, maybe not the whole picture. Apparently, rivers were just doing their own thing, even without the green stuff. That's a serious geological rewrite. It just goes to show you how much we're still learning about our own planet's history.
It's critical understanding, too, because it helps us better model how Earth's surface has evolved over time and how different geological processes, like erosion and deposition, have influenced climate conditions over vast timescales even before life as we know it became dominant on land.
And speaking of water, or maybe the current lack thereof in some places, the Great Salt Lake in Utah in the United States, it's shrinking, as we know, and apparently it's revealing some hidden secrets.
That's right. As the Great Salt Lake shrinks, largely due to prolonged drought and water diversion for human use, scientists are discovering these hidden groundwater-fed oases beneath its drying lake bed. And these aren't just, little puddles. They're described as reed-covered mounds and unstable surfaces. It indicates a previously unnoticed underground network of freshwater flowing towards the lake.
So there's hidden freshwater under there. How are they mapping it?
They're using techniques like airborne electromagnetic surveys and also installing devices called piezometers to measure groundwater pressure. The hope is that understanding, and maybe eventually tapping into these reserves, could play a crucial role in restoring the lake's fragile lakebed crusts. That would help mitigate the toxic dust pollution that blows off the exposed bed and also enhance the overall ecological health of the region.
It's like finding secret freshwater springs in the desert right under your nose, but only because the main body of water is disappearing. It really highlights both the fragility of our ecosystems and maybe the potential for innovative solutions, even in pretty dire circumstances. Speaking of discovering what's hidden beneath the surface, one explorer continues to redefine our understanding of the deep, the legendary Bob Ballard.
That's right. Bob Ballard, the renowned oceanographer who most famously discovered the Titanic wreck back in 1985. He's still going strong, continuing his 4-decade search for shipwrecks. But his commitment extends far beyond just finding sunken vessels. It's deeply rooted in marine archaeology and ocean conservation.
He really pioneered a lot of the technology, didn't he?
He absolutely did. Ballard revolutionized underwater exploration through his innovative use of remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and advanced imaging systems. His ongoing mission extends to preserving underwater heritage, which is incredibly important, and also using these explorations to inform climate change research.
His dedication is truly inspiring. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that even after decades of exploration, both on land and under the sea, there are still so many mysteries to uncover. And pioneers like Ballard are still leading the charge. Now, let's shift our focus quite dramatically to the intricate and often volatile landscape of global geopolitics. We have some significant flashpoints to discuss, starting with the escalating conflicts in the Middle East.
Yes, the sources we looked at highlight some really critical flashpoints, showing deep humanitarian concerns and significant civilian impact, alongside the stated military objectives. The situation in Gaza City in Palestine has escalated dramatically. Israeli military operations have intensified. This has forced hundreds, maybe thousands of Palestinians to flee their homes, often multiple times, as airstrikes continue. And the region is grappling not just with violence, but with famine and widespread illness. High civilian casualty rates are being reported.
And the aid organizations, what are they saying?
Well, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, they've voiced serious concerns over Israel's plans for mass evacuation, labeling them impractical and unsafe.
And despite this, dire humanitarian disaster, reports say Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government remains steadfast in its military strategy. Some analysts, according to Al Jazeera, are describing Israel's policies as tantamount to ethnic cleansing and calling for urgent international intervention. What's more, the U.S. is continuing to provide substantial military support to Israel. This is leading to growing demands for accountability and, well, a reassessment of international relations regarding this conflict. It's just a deeply tragic situation unfolding daily with an immense human cost.
It is, and the tragedy in Gaza is now compounded by the expansion of the conflict involving the Houthis in Yemen. Recent Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed Yemen's Houthi Prime Minister Ahmed Ghalib Nasser al-Rahawi, along with several other Houthi officials. This was widely reported by outlets like BBC, France 24, Reuters, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has, as you noted, vowed to continue military operations.
Right. With these escalating tensions and continued military operations, what's the most immediate risk here? Is this conflict likely to spill over? Who might get drawn in?
This significantly escalates tensions with the Iran-backed Houthi movement, there's no doubt. Houthi leader Abdel Malik al-Houthi has publicly condemned what he called Israel's record of terror and vowed continued resistance. And a very worrying development, according to reports, is that Houthis subsequently stormed a a UN agency headquarters in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. They detained UN staff.
Wow, UN staff detained.
Yes. And this, of course, further complicates international aid efforts in an already famine-stricken country. It really demonstrates the deeply fractured nature of the conflict and the risks to humanitarian operations.
And on a slightly different but still related front, we're seeing international efforts, citizen efforts really, to break the blockade on Gaza, along with a debate within the EU about potential sanctions against Israel.
That's correct. There's something called the Global Sumud Flotilla. It's described as the largest of its kind. It's preparing to depart from Barcelona in Spain with approximately 100 boats and hundreds of volunteers from 44 countries, including the prominent climate activist Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg is joining a flotilla to Gaza.
According to the reports, yes. Their stated aim is to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza and, in their words, break the illegal siege. Organizers have publicly stated they've prepared participants for potential interceptions by Israeli forces, which has happened with past flotillas. Thunberg herself has publicly denounced accusations of anti-Semitism while emphasizing the urgent humanitarian need in Gaza.
And meanwhile, diplomatically, within the EU.
Well, there's division. Germany has reportedly blocked EU efforts to sanction Israel over its military actions in Gaza. Specifically, they oppose suspending Israel's involvement in the Horizon Europe research program. That program provides crucial funding for Israeli startups, particularly in sectors like drone technology and artificial intelligence.
Okay, so Germany's blocking sanctions, but what about other EU countries?
Some states, like Denmark and Spain, are reportedly calling for stronger economic sanctions. But the EU remains divided on the issue.
So, this division, with some pushing for sanctions and Germany raising concerns about effectiveness and economic ties, it really shows the complex calculus involved in international responses to the crisis, doesn't it? It seems like a real struggle to balance humanitarian concerns with political and economic interests.
It absolutely is. The EU's lack of unified action on this, especially when you contrast it with its relatively rapid and robust response to the war in Ukraine, has drawn significant criticism. This internal division really underscores the deep political and strategic disagreements among member states regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict, and that ultimately impacts the effectiveness of any international pressure.
Okay, transitioning now to another major global conflict, let's talk about the ongoing war in Ukraine. We're seeing a clear tension there between calls for diplomacy and, well, continued escalation.
Yes. The narrative surrounding the war in Ukraine is particularly complex right now. It seems to be oscillating between, a desire for peace and the stark reality of a protracted conflict. For instance, Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó, according to RT, expressed concerns that the European Union is actually preparing for a long war, not peace. He went so far as to say the EU is effectively becoming the Ukrainian Commission by allocating tens of billions of euros to support Ukraine's military.
But then, from the U.S. perspective,
conversely, Axios reported that the White House is expressing frustration that certain European nations are obstructing peace efforts with what they call maximalist stances. The suggestion seems to be that some EU members are prolonging the war without contributing meaningfully to a resolution.
it sounds like everyone has a different playbook for peace, and they're all playing on different fields. How do we even begin to bridge these divides? Reports from RT suggest U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Ukraine to show more flexibility in negotiations. He's apparently expressed dissatisfaction with both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's perceived rigid stance and the EU's unwillingness to support what he calls a realistic settlement.
And the Russian perspective. Kremlin aide Kirill Dmitriev, also cited by RT, accused European warmongers of sabotaging a real peace process and criticized what he termed Biden's failed logic. Moscow's demands for peace, as they've stated, still revolve around Ukraine's neutrality and acknowledgement of Russian territorial claims.
And there was talk of a peacekeeping mission.
Yes, adding another layer, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron had apparently proposed a joint military peacekeeping mission. But Moscow predictably opposed that idea. It's a real diplomatic maze.
It really is. The differing perspectives seem like a significant impediment to any resolution. One side pushing for military aid, the other calling for flexibility on territory, the U.S. worried about maximalist demands. It makes genuine peace talks incredibly challenging.
It does. This ideological chasm, the gap between these positions, is huge. It makes finding common ground extremely difficult at this stage.
And meanwhile, the conflict continues to have devastating consequences on the ground. There are reports of assassinations and ongoing strikes.
Tragically, yes. France 24 reported a prominent Ukrainian politician was assassinated in western Ukraine. That stirred widespread unrest and highlighted the ongoing dangers for political figures within the country. Separately, Russian forces conducted another overnight drone attack on Odessa in southern Ukraine. According to Yahoo and RT, it severely affected local power supply and damaged critical infrastructure, particularly in the port city of Kornomorsk. An energy company, DTEK, confirmed 4 of its power facilities were hit, leaving over 29,000 residents without electricity.
Then Russia's explanation.
Russia stated these strikes were long-range and targeted military-related sites. Of course, Ukrainian officials often dispute the military-related aspect and consistently report damage to civilian infrastructure.
So this isn't just about frontline fighting. It's about continued destabilization, hitting infrastructure, impacting civilian life, prolonging this conflict into, its 42nd month now since the full-scale invasion. And if that wasn't enough volatility, President Zelensky is also making threats.
Yes, according to RT, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky threatened new deep strikes into Russia. He claimed Ukraine has developed a new long-range missile named the Flamingo, purportedly capable of reaching Moscow that's up to 3,000 kilometers away. However, the report notes mass production isn't expected for several months.
A missile called the Flamingo reaching Moscow, that sounds ambitious. Are there questions about this?
There are. British media reportedly raised questions about the missile's origin, noting similarities to a UK-made cruise missile, the FP5. It's a high-stakes claim, particularly as the U.S. has reportedly restricted Ukraine's ability to strike deep within Russian territory, precisely due to concerns about escalation.
Right. And this brings us to Germany's stance, which seems to have shifted regarding potential involvement.
It seems so. Bild and RT reported that Germany has abandoned plans to deploy troops to Ukraine for any kind of peacekeeping mission. This decision apparently followed President Trump's assertion that American forces would not be sent to the region. So instead, Germany will now focus on providing financial and military assistance, including training for Ukrainian soldiers and support for arms production.
Interesting how U.S. statements can directly influence European decisions like that.
It certainly highlights how the positions of major global powers, particularly the United States, continue to influence the military and diplomatic strategies of European nations in this conflict.
Okay, moving from Europe now over to Asia. Let's talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO Summit. This seems to be truly demonstrating Asia's shifting alliances, particularly amidst these ongoing global trade wars.
Yes, this summit is really a crucial demonstration of how global trade disputes are directly influencing geopolitical alliances. It seems to be pushing nations like India and China, despite their own historical tensions, closer together as they seek collective economic and security interests. The SCO Summit is taking place in Tianjin, China. It's bringing together over 20 world leaders. Notably, Russian President Vladimir Putin is there, and also Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This marks Modi's first visit to China since 2018, which is significant in itself.
So the tariffs coming from Washington, they aren't just affecting prices in your local store. They're literally reshaping the global political map. Mind blown. This summit is clearly seen as an effort by China, a rising superpower, to establish an alternative to the U.S.-led global order.
That seems to be a key driver. And a major backdrop, as you mentioned, is the ongoing U.S. trade war, including specifically the 50% tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on India, reportedly due to its purchases of Russian oil. This external pressure may actually be catalyzing warmer ties between India and China, despite their serious border conflicts back in 2020.
So what came out of the Modi-Xi meeting?
Well, during this summit, Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks aimed at stabilizing relations. They discussed enhancing connectivity, things like restarting direct flights between the countries, and also reopening border trade points that have been closed. Discussions also reportedly focused on reviving trilateral cooperation among India, China, and Russia, specifically to balance Western dominance. It signals a clear move towards envisioning, or at least exploring, a more multipolar world order.
And North Korea is involved too.
Yes, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is set to participate in a military parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Asia. His presence further highlights the significance of this gathering for regional and potentially global power dynamics. It represents a significant strategic alignment, seemingly in response to perceived Western pressures.
It's just fascinating to see how economic policy, like tariffs, can have such profound and maybe often unintended geopolitical consequences, pushing nations that might otherwise be rivals, like India and China, into potentially closer alignment. Okay, let's bring our attention back down to Earth now and look at some pressing issues affecting societal well-being and our planet itself. First up, public health, which seems to be at a real crossroads in the United States right now.
It certainly seems that way. And the debate here isn't just about, leadership turnover. It seems to be about the fundamental ideologies guiding public health policy and the potential, some fear, for a dangerous shift away from health equity. Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent from Vermont in the United States, has publicly called for the resignation of the U.S. Health Secretary, Robert Kennedy.
Why? What's the accusation?
Sanders accuses Kennedy of jeopardizing public health. This follows Kennedy's dismissal of Susan Linares, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, after less than a month in her job.
Okay, dismissing the CDC director is a big move. But it gets more alarming than that, doesn't it?
Yes, according to reports from Yahoo and MSNBC, Dr. Dimitris Galakis, who is a former CDC scientist, has alleged that Secretary Kennedy made some very concerning remarks. Remarks suggesting support for eugenics, specifically comments about superior genetics among administration members.
Eugenics. That's a deeply disturbing word to hear associated with the health secretary.
It is. Daskalakis warned that this kind of rhetoric is reminiscent of historical eugenics movements and poses a serious threat to public health policies. The fear is it could potentially lead to discrimination. That's a huge accusation, and it speaks to deeply rooted concerns about the direction of public health leadership.
Absolutely. The implications of such rhetoric, especially coming from a public health leader, could be far-reaching. It could erode public trust, influence policy in dangerous ways, potentially harming vulnerable populations.
The scientific community and public health advocates are, understandably, deeply concerned. The worry is that policy might be informed by these kinds of dangerous ideologies rather than by evidence-based approaches that prioritize health equity for everyone.
Okay, shifting gears slightly within public health, but still potentially huge news. There's some groundbreaking research that could change how we treat heart attacks.
Yes, a major clinical trial called the REBOOT trial has produced some really surprising results. It found that beta blockers, these are very common heart drugs used for decades after heart attacks, actually offer no significant benefits to patients who have preserved heart function. What's more, the trial suggested they could even pose heightened risks, particularly to women.
Wait, beta blockers, haven't those been standard treatment for ages?
For decades, yes. This challenges those established treatment protocols and really calls for a major reassessment of their use in patients who've had an acute myocardial infarction heart attack, but who do not exhibit signs of heart failure.
So millions of people have likely been taking these drugs, and now we're learning they might not be helping everyone, and could even be risky for some, especially women. That's a huge deal for cardiac care. It really emphasizes the need for more personalized treatment plans moving forward, doesn't it?
It truly does. This finding suggests a significant paradigm shift might be coming in how cardiologists approach post-heart attack management, moving away from a kind of one-size-fits-all approach to one that's much more tailored to individual patient profiles and their specific cardiac conditions.
Okay, let's talk about children's health and development now, including a topic I think every parent grapples with, screen time, and also its wider implications for mental well-being.
Well, on screen time, experts seem divided on setting universal guidelines for what's safe, but they largely agree on the principle of moderation. Pediatricians often suggest a screen-free environment for children under 3 years old. The World Health Organization, the WHO, advises limiting screen time to about 1 hour per day for children over 2. And they have more specific recommendations for older children and teens, generally increasing slightly with age, but still emphasizing limits.
It's not just about the time, though, is it?
No, exactly. Experts emphasize the quality of the content and the importance of parental involvement. It's not just how long, but what they're watching and how they're interacting with it. And this whole discussion ties into broader concerns about mental health. For example, a recent survey in Hong Kong, reported by the South China Morning Post, found that 20%, 1 in 5 secondary students experience moderate to severe depression, anxiety, and stress. That's an increase from the previous year. And it was often linked to academic pressures and procrastination.
20%, that's a significant number of young people grappling with serious mental health challenges. It really speaks to the pressures students face, probably globally, not just in Hong Kong, and the need for comprehensive support systems beyond just academic instruction, things like peer support, emotional well-being education for both students and parents.
Absolutely. These findings highlight the need for a holistic approach to child development, balancing digital engagement with fostering strong mental health and building resilience in the face of academic and social pressures.
And finally, in this public health section, we have a tragic reminder about the importance of vaccinations.
Yes, unfortunately. The BBC reported that a baby recently died from whooping cough. It was the first fatality from that illness this year. The heartbreaking detail is that the mother had not received a whooping cough vaccination during her pregnancy. It just starkly highlights the critical role of maternal immunization in protecting newborns, who are especially vulnerable before they can get their own shots.
Such a preventable tragedy. And on the vaccine front, there are also updates regarding COVID-19.
Yes, updated COVID-19 vaccines have been approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. These new versions are specifically targeting older adults and individuals with certain medical conditions who are at higher risk for severe infections.
So it's an ongoing battle for public health campaigns, isn't it? Addressing decreasing vaccination rates for established diseases like whooping cough, ensuring trust in vaccine safety, while also continually adapting to new and evolving threats like COVID-19.
Exactly. It underscores the dual challenges facing public health right now: the reemergence of preventable diseases due to vaccine hesitancy, and the continuous adaptation required to combat new viruses and variants.
Okay, let's pivot now to climate change and environmental adaptations, starting with a quite contentious debate happening in the United Kingdom.
Yes, the UK government has warned that proposals coming from Kemi Badenoch, a prominent figure in the Conservative Party, to extract basically all available oil and gas from the North Sea would significantly exacerbate the climate crisis. The Conservative Party has this commitment to maximizing extraction, citing energy security and job creation. But this directly clashes with the UK's own climate commitments and its obligations under the Paris Agreement.
It's that classic push-pull, isn't it? The need, or perceived need, for energy independence battling against the undeniable urgency of climate action. What's the right balance there? Critics argue, obviously, that this contradicts global efforts to combat climate change and undermines the transition to renewable energy. It really showcases the tension between those immediate economic incentives and the long-term environmental stewardship we need.
This internal debate within the UK really highlights a challenge faced by many nations. How do you manage current energy demands and maintain economic stability while simultaneously pursuing aggressive climate action goals? The immediate economic benefits of fossil fuel extraction are often weighed against those long-term, potentially catastrophic environmental costs. It's a very difficult balance.
From the North Sea, let's go back across the Atlantic. We heard earlier about the Great Salt Lake's hidden springs. But up in Maine, in the United States, a Native American tribe is facing a half-century-long struggle for clean drinking water, and it's now being worsened by climate change.
Yes, this is according to Inside Climate News. The Passamaquoddy tribe in Sepiak, Maine, is grappling with a profound environmental justice issue. For decades, residents have reported problems with their waterfowl odors, discoloration, and there are health concerns linked to chemicals called trihalmethanes, or THMs. These form when chlorine, used for disinfection, interacts with organic materials in the water source.
And climate change is making it worse.
Apparently, yes. Increased rainfall and changing drought patterns, which are attributed to climate change, are elevating the levels of organic material in Boyden Lake, their primary water source. That leads to higher THM levels after chlorination. And despite some recent improvements like new filters, decades of health issues and systemic challenges related to tribal sovereignty have really hindered community trust. Many residents still rely on bottled water, even now.
That's just unacceptable, a half-century without reliable, clean drinking water. It's such a stark example of how environmental changes disproportionately affect marginalized communities, and how systemic issues can erode trust even when solutions are attempted.
It's a clear case where environmental challenges intersect with historical injustices and issues of sovereignty, creating a very complex and difficult situation for the community.
Now, also related to warming, as temperatures in Britain rise, so does the demand for air conditioning. But this is leading to its own set of dilemmas.
That's right. The BBC reported on this trend. As temperatures rise, demand for air conditioning, AC, has surged in Britain, a country where it hasn't traditionally been widespread. But this trend brings concerns for health, finances, and the environment. Health experts warn about potential respiratory issues and dehydration from excessive AC use, especially in poorly ventilated spaces. Financially, the units are costly to purchase and maintain, and they use a lot of electricity. And environmentally, of course, they contribute to higher energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions, which just exacerbates the underlying problem of climate change.
So that cool blast of air might feel good now, but what does this all mean for our planet and our wallets down the line? It's a classic comfort versus consequence scenario, isn't it? Highlighting the need for maybe alternatives like better building design and natural ventilation.
It certainly is. This dilemma illustrates the broader challenge of adapting to a warming climate without inadvertently creating new problems, particularly when you consider the energy demands and the environmental footprint of widespread cooling technologies like AC.
And finally, in this section, a look back. Hurricane Katrina was 20 years ago now. A New York Times piece reminds us that New Orleans, in Louisiana, United States, still faces lingering lessons and challenges.
Yes. 2 decades after Hurricane Katrina devastated the city, New Orleans still grapples with significant challenges in disaster readiness and infrastructure. While there have certainly been improvements, particularly to the levee system, the need for continued upgrades, which require substantial funding, highlights ongoing vulnerabilities, especially in the face of climate change and rising sea levels. First-hand accounts in the article reveal the lingering impacts of the devastation, the trauma, but also the community's remarkable resilience and their yearning for a safer future.
It's a powerful reminder that even after 2 decades, the scars of such a disaster remain, and that preparedness for future climate events isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing, costly, and absolutely vital endeavor.
Okay, let's dive into some specifics now of U.S. domestic politics and governance. We're seeing some major proposed changes related to the electoral system and also the Federal Reserve. Yes, starting with elections. The debate here really centers on the balance between ensuring electoral integrity and guaranteeing broad access to the ballot box. And different political factions hold very distinct views on the appropriate federal role in this. U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans for an executive order mandating voter identification and voter ID for, in his words, every single vote. No exceptions.
This is tied to his claims about the 2020 election.
Yes, he's framing it as necessary to combat alleged election fraud from 2020. He also reportedly supports banning mail-in voting, with exceptions only for seriously ill individuals or military personnel, and wants a return to primarily paper ballots.
Okay, so on one hand, you have strong support for this plan among those who believe it combats fraud, a narrative President Trump has championed. But on the other hand,
opponents warn that strict voter ID requirements could disenfranchise millions of eligible voters, particularly those in marginalized communities who might lack the specific forms of ID required. And it's important to note, as multiple investigations and court cases have concluded, there's been no evidence found of widespread fraud that would have changed the outcome of the 2020 election.
and legally, can a president just mandate this via executive order?
That's questionable. Legally, a judge previously ruled that regulating the specifics of elections generally falls within the purview of the states and Congress, not solely the presidency through executive order. So it's a real legal and ideological battle brewing.
It certainly seems like a contentious issue, touching on fundamental aspects of democratic participation. The differing interpretations of electoral integrity versus voter access create deep divisions. Any unilateral executive action here is likely to face significant legal and political challenges.
That seems very likely, yes.
And speaking of potential overhauls by the administration, there are reports that President Trump could reshape the Federal Reserve Board.
Yes. The New York Times reported on this possibility, suggesting he might seek to overhaul the Fed board if he regains influence, or perhaps during his current term. In response, Republican Senator James Lankford, who sits on the Senate Finance Committee, emphasized the critical importance of maintaining the Federal Reserve's independence. He argued, according to Reuters, that its independence is crucial to preserve trust in the banking system and stabilize the economy.
Why is Fed independence considered so important?
Well, the concern is about political pressures influencing monetary policy. If the Fed loses its autonomy, decisions about interest rates, for example, could be swayed by short-term political goals rather than long-term economic health. This independence is seen as vital for controlling inflation and maintaining overall economic stability. It's worth noting, though, that Vice President J.D. Vance has voiced a different perspective on the Fed's operations in the past, suggesting there might be an appetite within the administration for a shift in how the Fed operates.
That's a huge deal. The Fed's independence is widely seen as a cornerstone of economic stability, shielding monetary policy from those short-term political whims. Any move perceived as politicizing it would likely send shivers through financial markets globally.
Exactly. The integrity and the perceived impartiality of the Federal Reserve are paramount for both domestic and international economic confidence. Any perceived political interference could have really far-reaching negative consequences for the U.S. and the global economy.
Now let's look at a clash shaping up between federal and local authorities, specifically in Chicago, Illinois, in the United States.
Yes, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has signed something called the Protecting Chicago Initiative. It's an executive order, and it's designed to resist the possible deployment of federal troops by the Trump administration within the city. Particularly, the concern seems to be around using troops for immigration enforcement.
This follows President Trump talking about using the National Guard more.
Correct. This comes after President Trump's declaration about expanding National Guard deployments to combat crime in various cities. Mayor Johnson's order is essentially a preemptive move.
It's a clash over federal versus local authority that could have real impacts on communities and civil liberties. So what does this all mean for the future of city-federal relations? Democratic leaders, like House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, are arguing that President Trump lacks the constitutional authority for these kinds of domestic troop deployments for law enforcement or immigration. They argue that militarization could actually harm city governance and local policing efforts. And reports also suggest that specific immigration enforcement operations targeting undocumented immigrants are being prepared by the administration, adding another layer of tension.
This situation really underscores the ongoing friction between federal directives and local autonomy, especially when it comes to sensitive issues like immigration and law enforcement. The mayor's order is a clear signal of resistance against what is perceived in Chicago as an overreach of federal power. It highlights significant ideological and constitutional disagreements between the city and the current federal administration.
And finally, in U.S. domestic politics, we're seeing significant job cuts announced at the Voice of America, VOA, and its parent agency.
That's right. The U.S. Agency for Global Media, or USAGM, which oversees Voice of America and other U.S.-funded international broadcasters, announced over 500 job cuts. It's part of what they're calling a reduction in force initiative. And this decision comes even amidst legal challenges against the acting CEO, Kari Lake.
Why the cuts? What's the rationale given?
The stated rationale is that the cuts are part of efforts to reduce federal spending and improve efficiency, as mandated by the Trump administration. However, it's a concerning move, given VOA's historical role in international broadcasting, particularly in providing news in places with restricted media and countering authoritarian narratives.
Are the employees fighting this?
Yes, DW reported that employees are suing to prevent the layoffs. They're raising concerns about the legality of the process and the potential impact on the mission of U.S. international broadcasting. It raises questions about the future direction and effectiveness of these outlets, especially their ability to maintain independence and reach in a complex global media landscape while facing internal budget cuts and political scrutiny.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to crime, social issues, and culture from around the globe, starting with a deeply troubling humanitarian crisis in Mexico.
Yes, the BBC reported that thousands of Mexicans protested across major cities recently. They were demanding government action regarding an estimated 130,000 missing persons in the country. These disappearances are often linked to the powerful drug cartels. These demonstrations reflect just deep societal pain and widespread criticism of the government's response, or lack thereof. Families highlighted the immense emotional toll, calling for reforms, accountability, and transparency. The protesters argue that without significant changes, disappearances and the associated impunity will just continue to plague the nation.
That number is just astonishing and heartbreaking, 130,000 missing people. It really underscores the profound impact of organized crime on everyday citizens and the urgent need for systemic change and transparency from the government.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost when criminal activity persists on such a scale, often intertwined with governmental inability, or some argue, unwillingness to address the root causes effectively. The calls for reform and transparency aren't just political demands, they are cries for justice and basic human rights.
We've also seen reports recently of police violence during protests, but in different parts of the world.
Yes, a couple of instances stood out. In Germany, DW reported that Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs expressed concern to German authorities. This was after an incident involving police violence against an Irish woman named Katie O'Brien during a pro-Palestinian protest in Berlin. She reportedly suffered a broken arm. German police are investigating. Separately, down in Australia, Al Jazeera reported on anti-immigration rallies, styled as March for Australia. These led to clashes with counter-protesters, and police reportedly used pepper spray to separate the groups.
These incidents, though different, both raise serious questions about police handling of demonstrations, even when they are peaceful, and about accountability when force is used. Australian officials condemn those anti-immigration rallies for fostering hate and division, fearing they might embolden far-right groups. It's always a delicate balance, isn't it? Protecting the right to protest while maintaining public safety. And when force is used, it really needs careful scrutiny.
Absolutely. These incidents highlight the global tensions surrounding issues of protest, immigration, and civil liberties, and they underscore the crucial importance of maintaining a high standard of police conduct and accountability to prevent further escalation and the erosion of public trust.
Moving over to Southeast Asia now, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto recently canceled a planned trip to China. Why?
He canceled it amidst escalating anti-government protests across Indonesia. According to Al Jazeera, the protests were fueled by public anger over reports of excessive pay allowances for lawmakers, especially galling amid rising living costs for ordinary Indonesians. The protests included violent clashes with police, and tragically arson at a parliamentary building reportedly resulted in 3 fatalities. Vehicles were also set ablaze.
That sounds serious. How did the government respond beyond canceling the trip?
In one notable move, the government pressured TikTok to temporarily suspend its live broadcast features. The stated aim was to manage disinformation spreading about the events.
So trying to control the narrative.
That's what activists are criticizing. They argue the government is focusing on narrative control rather than addressing the citizens' genuine concerns about economic hardship and perceived political corruption.
It reflects deep dissatisfaction with political representatives and ongoing economic struggles. It's a common tension we see globally, really, when economic hardship meets perceived government excess or indifference.
Indeed. And the government's intervention with social media platforms like TikTok highlights that broader struggle over information control and public dissent in our digital age. It further complicates efforts to address the underlying socioeconomic grievances.
Okay, now let's turn to a particularly sensitive and often highly politicized issue: mass shootings and identity politics, specifically in the U.S. context.
Yes, this really exemplifies the tension in public discourse. Complex issues of violence and mental health often intersect with identity politics, making nuanced discussion extremely challenging. There was an instance reported by Yahoo and The Guardian where Sebastian Gorka, who served as a counterterrorism advisor under President Trump, was fact-checked on CNN. He had claimed there was an uptick in mass shootings being committed by transgender individuals. He referenced a recent tragic church shooting in Minnesota, allegedly by someone named Robin Westman, and also a previous incident in Nashville.
And the fact check, what was the issue?
Well, the CNN anchor challenged Gorka's immediate focus on the alleged perpetrator's gender identity, questioning irrelevance and raising accusations of insensitivity, especially so soon after the tragedy. It highlights how these deeply tragic events can quickly become fodder for highly charged political and social debates. These debates often distract, some argue, from addressing the broader complexities of gun violence and mental health struggles.
And there was a response from the Pope.
Yes. Pope Leo responded to the Minnesota shooting by calling for an urgent end to what he termed a pandemic of arms. His statement highlighted the interconnectedness of gun violence and mental health struggles, calling for a broader approach.
It's tough. The debate over motivations and identities in these tragedies is so often fraught with difficulty, isn't it? It can inadvertently generalize individual actions to entire groups. The Pope's call seems to emphasize a broader, systemic issue that maybe transcends specific identity politics, advocating for solutions that tackle gun violence and mental health comprehensively.
That seems to be the intention, yes, focusing on the tools of violence and the need for better mental health support as overarching issues.
And finally, in this section on crime and social issues, we have news from the world of international organized crime. A major bounty has been placed on a notorious cartel heir.
That's right. Yahoo reported that U.S. authorities have placed a $10 million bounty on Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar. He is an heir of the infamous Sinaloa cartel and a son of the now-imprisoned drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. He himself is implicated in extensive drug trafficking operations and significant violence associated with the cartel.
$10 million. That's a serious statement from the U.S. government.
It reflects the U.S. government's intensified efforts to dismantle what remains one of the world's most powerful drug trafficking organizations, and, by extension, to combat the drug-related crime and violence that affects both the U.S. and Mexico so profoundly. Targeting key figures like Guzman Salazar is seen as a strategic priority in that ongoing complex battle.
Okay, let's move into our final section for today, covering technology, the economy, and some consumer insights. Starting with the fascinating and sometimes slightly scary world of tech giants and market shifts. NVIDIA.
Yes, NVIDIA. They're a dominant player in the technology sector, especially with AI chips right now. They recently announced something quite astonishing. Their top two unnamed mystery customers accounted for 39%, almost 40%, of their second quarter 2025 revenue. Their total revenue was huge, $46.7 billion, a 56% increase year over year, but having so much depend on just two customers.
Wow, nearly 40% from just two clients. That's incredible, especially for a company that basically owns the market for GPUs, graphics processing units used for AI. They reportedly have over 80% of that market. While their growth is obviously supercharged by AI and data centers, that level of customer concentration seems like a real high-wire act for investors, doesn't it?
It certainly raises significant concerns among analysts about the risks associated with such high customer concentration. Despite NVIDIA's current dominance and growth trajectory, such dependence means that any significant shifts in orders from these two major clients could dramatically impact NVIDIA's performance. It really highlights the potential need for robust diversification, even for market leaders, in this very competitive tech landscape.
And speaking of AI, the predictions for some of these companies are just, well, mind-blowing.
They really are. Yahoo Finance highlighted predictions that one leading AI company, they didn't name which one specifically, is projected to reach a staggering $10 trillion market valuation by the year 2030.
10 trillion. With a T.
10 trillion, yes. And separately, another report on Yahoo Finance suggested that TSMC, that's the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, a key chip maker for companies like NVIDIA and Apple, is on track to potentially become a $2 trillion giant itself. Both of these incredibly optimistic forecasts are being driven by the massive surge in AI adoption across practically all industries. They're attributed to innovative technology, strategic partnerships, and this widely held view that AI is going to be a truly pivotal, transformative force in the global economy.
$10 trillion. That's not just big, that's almost unfathomably huge. It really shows how much the financial world is betting on AI to just fundamentally change every sector of the economy.
These predictions absolutely reflect the profound impact AI is expected to have on global productivity, on innovation, on economic growth. It's expected to reshape entire industries and create entirely new markets. The companies perceived to be at the forefront of this technological revolution are therefore poised, in the eyes of analysts, for potentially exponential expansion.
And on the ground, literally driving around, we're seeing Waymo's robotaxi fleet expanding rapidly, too.
Yes, TechCrunch reported that Waymo's fleet of robotaxis has surpassed 2,000 fully autonomous vehicles. They're operating now in cities like San Francisco, Phoenix, and Los Angeles in the United States. And apparently, they're serving over 250,000 paid rides every single week.
250,000 paid rides a week in driverless cars. That's quite something.
It really highlights Waymo's competitive edge in the autonomous vehicle market right now. But it also points to the broader challenges of things like EV, electric vehicle infrastructure, needed to support these large fleets. Waymo also recently received permission to begin testing its vehicles in New York City, which is sure to intensify the competition, particularly with Tesla's own stated robotaxi aspirations.
It's a real race to define the future of urban transportation, isn't it? And it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the infrastructure, the regulations, public acceptance, all of it.
Exactly. The expansion of these large autonomous fleets will undoubtedly place additional demands on urban infrastructure, especially EV charging networks. And it will require very careful regulatory frameworks to ensure safety and build public trust as these kinds of autonomous services become more prevalent in our daily lives.
Okay, let's turn now to some global economic indicators and trade issues, starting with consumer confidence in Africa.
According to Bloomberg Economics, consumer confidence across the continent of Africa is facing significant headwinds right now. It's being jeopardized by factors like soaring inflation, uncertainties around global tariffs, and inconsistent economic growth across different regions. Rising prices are eroding purchasing power for many households. Supply chain challenges persist, often due to geopolitical tensions happening elsewhere. and local economic policies are sometimes struggling to adapt quickly enough. This confluence of factors creates a really challenging economic environment for many African nations and consumers right now.
It's a tough situation, especially when so many of those factors are external, like global geopolitical tensions affecting supply chains or international commodity prices driving inflation. It underscores just how interconnected the global economy is and how events happening far away can directly impact local consumer sentiment and well-being.
It does. The report highlights the urgent need for governments and policymakers across the continent to devise strategies that can help stabilize the economic environment, boost consumer confidence, and foster more sustainable growth. Things like clarity in tariff regulations and proactive responses to inflationary pressures are key.
And speaking of tariffs, President Trump's global trade policies have apparently suffered a legal setback here in the U.S.
Yes, according to the South China Morning Post and Axios, a U.S. federal appeals court has ruled that President Trump's global tariffs, the ones imposed broadly on goods like steel and aluminum, were imposed illegally. Specifically, the court found they were imposed improperly under an emergency law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, i.e. EPA. However, the tariffs actually remain in place for now, as the case is expected to continue, likely heading to the Supreme Court.
So the court says they were illegal, but they stay for now. What was the reaction from the administration?
Well, reflecting the strong convictions behind these policies, one Trump advisor was quoted as saying that blocking these tariffs would be, quote, the end of the United States. So they clearly intend to fight the ruling.
This creates a huge amount of uncertainty, doesn't it, for U.S. trading partners, for businesses, and potentially could lead to billions of dollars in refunds if the ruling is ultimately upheld. It really highlights the legal complexities and these big constitutional questions about presidential authority under laws like the IEPA. It's a legal battle with massive economic implications.
Indeed. The legal challenge to the tariffs underscores the checks and balances within the U.S. system regarding executive authority on trade matters. And the outcome will have profound impacts on global trade relations and the U.S. economy, one way or another.
Okay, on a potentially more positive note for international trade and industry, the UK has reportedly secured a significant defense deal with Norway.
Yes, the BBC reported that the UK government has secured a very significant deal, valued at around $10 billion, to supply warships to Norway. This deal is expected to create thousands of jobs across the UK, with a particular concentration over 2,000 jobs anticipated in Scotland, where much of the shipbuilding capacity lies. It's seen as strengthening the defense capabilities and also the economic stability for both nations, who are, of course, key NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies. It reflects a strategic move amidst rising security concerns in Europe.
That sounds like a huge win for the UK's defense industry and a clear sign of strengthening alliances within NATO. It's not just about the money, it's about collective security in what feels like an increasingly turbulent world.
It reflects that broader trend we're seeing of increased military collaboration and procurement among NATO allies, partly in response to the war in Ukraine, but also addressing other contemporary threats and bolstering strategic coordination, particularly in the North Atlantic region.
All right, now for some perhaps lighter notes and human interest stories, because even with all this heavy news, life, as they say, goes on, and people are still finding ways to live it up, or at least grab a bargain. Let's talk about Labor Day sales and consumer trends.
Well, it seems the traditional Labor Day sales are in full swing. Reports from sites like 9 to 5 Toys and Yahoo highlight significant discounts, some reaching up to 75% off. These deals are available in a wide variety of products, Apple products, other tech gadgets, kitchen items at major retailers like Amazon and Walmart. It indicates that consumers are still definitely looking for good deals, perhaps especially amidst the economic shifts and inflation we've discussed.
Looks like despite all the heavy news, we're still finding a way to treat ourselves and maybe catch some live entertainment. Yahoo Finance noted that cultural events, things like big concerts, they mentioned Bad Bunny specifically, and also major sporting events like F1, Formula One races, are still drawing crowds. It reflects a consumer willingness to spend on experiences, maybe prioritizing those memorable moments, even despite things like the Trump-era tariffs potentially impacting the cost of goods. It's a testament, perhaps, to people wanting to enjoy life and connect through those shared experiences.
It certainly seems so. This trend indicates a certain resilience in consumer behavior. Discretionary spending, particularly on experiences and cultural events, appears to remain relatively strong. It suggests maybe a prioritization of lifestyle and entertainment for some segments of the population, despite those broader economic pressures.
Now, turning to the world of sports, we've seen some moments recently highlighting sportsmanship and sometimes the lack thereof, particularly in tennis at the U.S. Open.
Yes, a couple of incidents drew attention. First, Latvia's Jelena Ostapenko publicly apologized to America's Taylor Townsend. This was after Ostapenko made comments during their U.S. Open match about Townsend having no education, which sparked considerable controversy and discussions online, including about potential racial undertones. Her apology aimed to smooth that over. In a separate, much more positive incident, tennis player Kamil Matrezek actually met up with a young fan. This happened after a viral video showed an adult spectator snatching Matrezek's hat right off his head as he was leaving the court. He later connected with the disappointed young fan, turning a negative experience into a heartwarming one.
Good for him. These incidents, both the apology and the hat incident, they highlight the importance of respectful dialogue, cultural sensitivity, and basic sportsmanship in professional athletics, don't they? And also the positive impact athletes can potentially have off the court, like Matrezek did. It's a reminder that even in these highly competitive environments, basic human decency really matters.
And these moments, both good and bad, often serve as valuable public lessons. They can foster discussions about appropriate conduct and the broader responsibilities that athletes might have as public figures and role models.
And finally today, let's look up to the sky one last time for some upcoming celestial displays that sound truly awe-inspiring.
Absolutely. Space.com reports that a powerful cannibal solar storm is currently on its way to Earth. This is likely to enhance the visibility of the northern lights, the aurora borealis, over the upcoming Labor Day weekend, that's September 1st and 2nd, 2025. The aurora might be visible in as many as 18 U.S. states, much further south than usual, and also parts of Canada.
A cannibal solar storm, what does that mean?
It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? It's basically when a faster-moving coronal mass ejection, or CME, from the sun overtakes and engulfs a slower one that was launched earlier. This combination can create a more complex and potentially more potent geomagnetic storm when it hits Earth's magnetic field. And that's not all that's happening up there. Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury are set to line up beautifully in the pre-dawn sky on September 1st, offering a stunning planetary conjunction for early risers. And then mark your calendars for September 7th, there's set to be a blood moon, which is a total lunar eclipse.
Wow. What's fascinating here is, as we navigate all these complex and often difficult earthly challenges we've talked about today, the universe still offers us these incredible, awe-inspiring spectacles. It's kind of a reminder of something larger than ourselves, isn't it? It's a beautiful way to end our deep dive into the news, I think, with a touch of cosmic wonder.
I agree. From the earliest galaxies, just forming at the edge of the observable universe, right down to the complex political negotiations and societal issues happening right now. This deep dive has really revealed, once again, just how interconnected everything is, the cosmos and our human experience. The unfolding stories, whether they're about scientific breakthroughs, geopolitical tensions, or societal challenges, they're all part of this single, vast, intricate tapestry.
So what does this all mean? That's the question we always ask. Perhaps.
Okay.
Perhaps it means that even as our scientific understanding of fundamental things like gravity or the origins of life continues to shift, and even as geopolitical landscapes continuously rearrange themselves, maybe our fundamental human needs for connection, for knowledge, and for a little bit of wonder remain constant. Stay curious, because there's always more to learn and unpack. Join us again next time for another deep dive into the stories shaping our world.